Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the shocking story of American Restoration, that the magic was captured by American Restoration. Of retrieving lost riches from life while cultivating a devoted following centered on its enthusiasm and inventiveness, it was among the most thrilling programs on history. Was replete with television and amusement prior to a terrible mishap altered all of that, shaking the crew to its center and signaled the demise of it. Join us for a show that once seemed unstoppable. When we examine the specifics of the tragic events that resulted in the conclusion of the cherished program, how it all began. American Restoration, which developed into a cherished reality TV shows on the millions of people are captivated by History Channel. With its emphasis on breathing new life into the past treasures, which Left Field Pictures produced. The first 6 seasons of the show were filmed amid the bustling metropolis of Las Vegas, Nevada. It observed the regular routines at the workshop Rick's Restorations is owned by. Along with his group, Rick Dale took deteriorated ancient objects and repaired them, restoring ancient antiques to their previous splendor. Another opportunity to shine. Rick Dale's exploration of the restoration industry didn't start out with TV cameras or a production team. It began with a lot of earlier in his early years in Los. Growing up in Vegas, a city renowned for its bright lights and continual change, discovered that he was fascinated to the remains of old items from the past captivated him. While some children may have used their, Rick spends his days playing video games or sports. Frequently observed meandering through, visiting antique shops and junkyards, the treasures that others had discarded from an early age. Rick displayed a unique ability to mend damaged items. He would disassemble outdated appliances to observe how they functioned before replacing them together more effectively than previously. It was only about mechanics for him. About appreciating the artistry and work that was required to create these. He finds any rusting machine objectionable. Included a piece of history or a secret story awaiting the untying of each bolt. Gear related to him, a tale about a different time he fixed each item, and his enthusiasm for preservation and heritage became more powerful when Rick entered as an adult. His passion for repair did not calm, but rather became more serious. He made the decision to turn his pastime into a career, and with perseverance and countless hours, he established Rick's Restorations. Establishing the company from it wasn't an easy task. Rick encountered numerous obstacles, from financial difficulties in locating others who expressed his sincere gratitude for old goods, but his ability and eventually, perseverance paid off slowly. But eventually, news of Rick's amazing work. His store gained recognition for its fine craftsmanship and attention to detail, to specifics. Genuine enthusiasm that was evident in each restoration. Rick might see possibilities where others couldn't. Observe deterioration and rust, whether it was a broken-down automobile and a tattered soda machine or an old, dusty bicycle. Rick addressed each project in the same passion. He thought that these things weren't just things, they were historical artifacts. He could produce them with the right methods and attention. Life once more. With such innate ability and commitment, it was just a question of time. Prior to Rick attracting the interest of the History Channel as a television producer, was already operating a profitable series known as Pawn Stars, which sometimes shown objects being repaired. Rick's performance impressed the producers. Knowledge, his enthusiasm, and the strong backstories of the works he created. They noticed something unique in Rick, not only as an artist but also as someone who may, in a sense, bring history to life. That a large audience would find compelling. Rick was initially apprehensive about taking the stage. He was utilized to perform poorly while working in his shop. Additionally, he questioned whether there was sufficient material to construct a complete show of what he did the most of at the time. His work was centered on fixing outdated gas pumps and selling devices, and he wasn't certain that people would think that's fascinating. However, after a while, support from the production crew, Rick made the decision to try that choice resulted in the creation of American Restoration. The idea behind the presentation was straightforward yet quite appealing. Old, forgotten artifacts were featured in the program, being revived with challenging workability and inventiveness. Rick's tough personality, and with his sincere passion for his work made him a favorite right away with spectators. His changes seemed almost lovely recollections of the previous and active work from Rick's squad also contributed significantly to their achievement. His brother Ron's playful attitude and countless jokes offered humorous relief while demonstrating his abilities to be Rick's wife, a skilled mechanic. Kelly managed the business side of things, managing clients and money with ease. Tyler, their excited youngster, holding their hands steadily, was frequently observed working under his father's vigilant gaze, catching the abilities that Rick had spent his entire life learning. Master other members of the team, such as Cowboy, tough but competent fabricator, and Bretley, the good-hearted, but occasionally their own charm was provided by their awkward aide. Bring individuality to the program. Together they didn't feel like a family. Work environment and the feeling of authenticity. The connection was made on screen. Viewers were not only interested in the repairs, but for the connections, the challenges, the humor, and the swiftly wins. The American Restoration rose through the ranks to be among the most successful History Channel's programs. It generated 2.9 on average millions of viewers per week, and even reached 6.5 million viewers at its highest point. Establishing network records for 6 seasons, the program revived history to life, sharing one project at a time. Rick Dale's passion, talent, and spirit, and his remarkable group all about American Restoration. Restoration was distinct from the others television reality shows because it combined genuine craftsmanship with compelling narrative in a manner that felt utterly genuine and truthful, yet many reality programs are eager to dwell on disagreements. American repairs or ostentatious makeovers. Restoration provided a lot of deeper by allowing visitors to see behind the scenes. Numerous rehabilitation initiatives demonstrating not just the effort, but the passion that goes into each project. Introduced anew. Each episode features a new task and a tale. Presented a brand new product that had seen in better times. These works were frequently discovered damaged, corroded, and abandoned, appearing as though they had no chance of ever being utilized once more. The thrill starts when Rick Dale and his group arrived at Rick's Restorations manages to obtain these lost gems. They would examine each functional detail in depth, determine precisely what has to be done to return every object to its initial state. Beauty at this initial phase of the procedure was vital, not merely necessary. It established the foundation for all that coming next. The group would create a strategy. Occasionally recognizing that components needed to be completely reconstructed from the ground up, viewers were accompanied at every stage of this voyage, from the initial look at the item's breakdown to the final amazing disclosure of American Restoration. Matched sincere artistry with expertise, narrative, and intense feeling in a manner few shows ever have. This uncommon combination made it genuinely unique, assisting it in overcoming the congested globe of reality television. It provided viewers with genuine, lovely, and something unforgettable. The reason the show was so captivating was how thoroughly it examined the actual work behind restoration of each episode with care, demonstrated the time and work required to reduce the object to its smallest size. Components, each bolt, nut, and frame was cleaned, fixed, or swapped out when essential. The group's dedication to authenticity was always evident. They would often employ old-fashioned approaches alongside contemporary tools to make sure the item looked and felt exactly how it would have when it was initially made. Meanwhile, restoration in America was never simply for repairing outdated machinery. The program was about reviving historical events. Every item has a backstory, and the program took the time to find those tales, whether a jukebox was used to once played music in a diner from the 1950s, vibrant petrol pump that was displayed with pride at a vintage bicycle, or a roadside station once sped through the streets of a tiny town. Each piece had recollections of another time. Acquiring knowledge of the historical every project was even more unique. Like traveling back in time, knowing not only the thing but the world from which it originated. The individual tales related to these objects created the performance much more potent. Items that entered Rick's store where they were more than simply antiques. Cherished heirlooms from the family, they had been transmitted from one generation to generation, bringing with them the feelings and recollections of whole families. American Restoration demonstrated how these things were significant to the populace. Whoever introduced them, viewers could sense the strong emotional bond these owners were required to watch. These restoring cherished items to their former splendor was frequently a really poignant encounter when the customers went back to observe their responses to the completed job. Where a lot of people were moved to tears. Overtaken by the sight of something they beautifully, loved ones come back to life. These poignant events brought depth to the program that greatly increased. Rather than merely another series about repairing, it has to do with keeping memories alive. Respecting and commemorating family heritage. There was also a strong sense of the past. Aching longing that permeated each episode. When the majority of things are inexpensively produced and promptly discarded, viewers were reminded by American Restoration of a time when durable objects were constructed. The refurbished objects on the episode were used as live historical artifacts and concrete connections to a slower, simpler, and frequently more meaningful lifestyle. Viewers weren't simply amused, they were returned to when workmanship was important. Every blemish had a backstory. Described the show's most cherished restoration of the 1951 Ford F100 owned by Rick Dale. The pickup truck is among the most strong demonstrations of his abilities and commitment. It's more than just an outdated car revived, it is a representation of his love, his enthusiasm, and his hard effort for his actions throughout the years. The truck is now a part of Rick's narrative, signifying the lengthy hours and dedication required to actually bring something that has been forgotten comes back to life. Vehicle turned into a unique project during Rick's relationship in the early days of the show began with this truck more than 15 years ago. He had purchased it in parts, but the time was never ideal for a full dive into its restoration. Additional tasks and the job schedule appeared to always come first, and the truck waited for the moment when the American Restoration on television started. Everything changed. The producers noticed the truck and recognized it right away. Its possibilities, so they urged Rick to bring it back to life at last by pushing him to place it on his lengthy list of initiatives that motivated Rick to inspiration. He required to begin the piece once. The producers asked Rick to take Eli in the Ford F100. Rick was familiar with the truck when filming in Nevada. Wasn't prepared for such a journey, and precisely as he expected it broke down during filming, but this setback didn't slow him considerably. In fact, it made it possible for the visitors to watch the full voyage, the change from a heap of corroded parts into a strong shining truck. The whole process unfolded in front of the cams, making the truck story more special for those who followed the show. As the Ford's restoration proceeded, F100 gradually gained the shop's trust. Workhorse, it was employed for running tasks, take up pieces and help move supplies, demonstrating that it was not only a showcase. The truck's makeover reflected the essence of American restoring itself, taking an ancient and damaged and replacing it with a new one. Purpose, in contrast to many vintage cars which wind up residing in garages. Truck was a real everyday driver. Participation in the American Restoration display not only the truck's aesthetic appeal but moreover, Rick's amazing artistic talent. Part of Ford's fleet, Rick's 1951 Ford F100, the initial FS series, was first constructed for strength and dependability in America. Now after the war, this repaired version has a rich gleam, chrome highlights and a black paint job that is polished and finely completed bodywork. Even despite this, Rick has retained some of it's obvious that mechanical upgrades are secret. The truck combines vintage design with contemporary dependability. Rick provides an honest assessment of the truck. 8 out of 10 for consistently identifying that there's still space for tiny enhancements. The truck was unique and it showed up in every scene, capturing the light right next to the raging engine with pride, and the backstory enhancing its worth even further. It is impossible to miss when painted in black, providing the truck with a daring, and every time it rolls, it has an unforgettable appearance. You can practically feel it across the screen. Its essence, it's not merely a restored car, a living remembrance of key component of Rick Dale's path and an ideal representation of the heart and spirit. He works hard at everything he restores, but in the background, the atmosphere at Rick's restorations was equally as significant as the items they worked on. Their enthusiasm, commitment, and individuality personalities were crucial to the success of the show. They gave spectators a sense of as though they were a family, greeting them as they enter the workshop and sharing each and every triumph and hardship. Unfortunately, the magic was short-lived. Eventually, a horrible disaster brought the cherished series to an unexpected and terrible conclusion that left fans stunned, and the reason why Americans are heartbroken. Repairing concluded in 2014 was the year that everything began to collapse. The creators of American Restoration decided that Rick Dale just couldn't sustain what they intended to bring more drama that is scripted into the episodes, fabricating disputes and arranging circumstances that Rick believed were utterly deceitful for a man who had based his reputation and career on genuine, touching tales and sincere. This concept of restorations was too much to recognize that for Rick, it was more than just repairing issues. It was about respecting the inventiveness of the. Previously, Rick had always been proud of the truthfulness of his work in every rehabilitation. Each project was completed in a true feelings, genuine effort, and the narratives behind every piece were equally significant. As the end product, he ensured that vocally express his worries, and evidently, however, the producers were resolute to stick to their new strategy. They felt that the show needed a boost to continue well-liked and maintain viewers' interest. Were certain that incorporating drama, even if the only method to save it wasn't real, preventing the show from faltering. Removing the hostility between Rick and the producers continued to expand until it reached a place from which there was no return. At last, a choice was reached that would alter the course of American history forever. Restoration, in a startling and the History Channel's devastating move, decided to take Rick Dale and his whole team from the program. Suddenly, the personalities that fans had grown to adore and trust were lost. Rather than concentrating on the show, attempted to reinvent Rick's shop itself. It moved the focus to 5 several stores throughout the nation, each focusing on a distinct kind of body. Straw Industries Restoration in Los Angeles contributed their expertise. Wheels via the restoration of vintage cars. North Carolina's Time Museum evolved into Bob's, is renowned for its vintage motorcycles. Detroit Garage, dedicated to repairing Steve's restorations, and Hot Neon Signs Rods worked on custom projects in New York. Vehicles Monkey Business in Las Vegas handled all sorts of bizarre and unique vintage things. At first it seemed like this fresh technique might give something intriguing. There was obviously variation in the many stores and their specialties, but despite the fresh faces and new projects, anything important was absent. The show no longer had the same heart. It lacked the close connection, the poignant times, and the real sentiment that had made Americans. The new version of the restoration is extremely remarkable. Felt dispersed, more like an assortment of sporadic endeavors rather than a genuine adventure. Rick and his group had served as the heart of the demonstrate. Their love for their connections and their diligence had served as the binding agent that kept everything together in their absence. The American Restoration felt vacuous and devoted. Fans who had been watching the program for years were astonished and profoundly disappointed. Many people felt lost without Rick providing direction for each episode. The major reason many had watched was to see Rick use his hands to bring forgotten restores riches to life, yet at that time the enchantment vanished when the 7th season debuted in January of 2016. The response was, at best, mixed. Liked seeing new stores and various types of repairs, although the majority of long-term fans were disappointed since they didn't sense the similar sentimental attachment to the new cast they saw without Rick and his group. But there's no reason to keep watching Rick. Not on the show anymore, but still very much cared regarding his followers. He uploaded a video pleading in order for them to be heard by providing comments on the official website for American Restoration. However, he kept quiet about the precise causes why he was removed. The real reason why, even now, the decision is still unknown. Fans continued to listen, flooding social media and online complaint forums expressing their frustration and grief over the original's lost cast. What had developed into a secure and, for many folks, a nostalgic getaway was abruptly disappeared, yet the recollections of the restores, the incredible craftsmanship and the heartwarming tales persisted in their hearts. The new group, in spite of skills, found it difficult to form the same connection with the audience. The friendliness and integrity which Rick and his team had inherently brought to the performance simply couldn't be recreated. Consequently, ratings began to the History Channel had wagered in the fall. Everything in a fresh format in the hopes that would give the show a new lease on life, but rather, it pushed the devoted audience away. In the meantime, behind the scenes, the same stresses that had made life difficult. Rick now placed a great deal of weight on the news store's constantly tight filming schedules, requests for engaging material and the drive for phony drama all contributed to a stressful setting. Reports started to surface regarding disputes between the new cast members and the producers, returning to the same issues that had what first led Rick to depart. As the months passed, it grew increasingly and clearer that the updated version of American Restoration was unable to the essence of the original, regardless of how difficult them attempted. By late 2016, the text on the show, which was visible on the wall, was previously one of History Channel's treasures, was silently terminated. The network switched its attention to other projects, departing the American Restoration. Will eventually. Rick reflects on the history of television, his post-departure